Hello, thank you for joining us once again. If it's your second time, if it's your first time, we've done this once before, so you can check either on my channel or on Peter's channel, depending on how you got here for the original broadcast. But thanks for joining me, Peter, again.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you so much. We made it to episode 2. We're golden.
That's right.
Everything's coming up, Jake and Peter.
And you made I wanted to catch up on the videos that you had made. Why don't you tell me about the last, not the interview you did, but you just did a typology video. What was the last typology video you did? What was that on? Because I didn't get a chance to catch it.
Oh man, I've been making a lot of videos these last few days. What was the last one I did? Was it about how FI and FE deal with arguments?
Yeah, I think that was the one I was looking at, but I didn't get a chance to watch.
Yeah. I basically went into a talk about how FI and FE deal with arguments and discussions very differently, especially when they're upset. Whereas, FI users, introverted feeling users, often don't want the extroverted feeler to make them feel better. They just want to be heard because it's more of a statement of a general opinion than directed at anything specific. And it was something that entered my mind. It wasn't really a super detailed or long video. It was just a quick rant that I wanted to get out.
Well, I think FI probably has that a lot in common with TI, where TI sometimes the resolution is just mutual understanding, not necessarily mutual agreement.
Exactly. Yeah, you have been talking about how TI and FI are sort of similar in a lot of ways. Could you explain what you mean by that?
I know. Well, I mean, I noticed just in my interactions with people who are also dominant in FI as well as TI that I just observationally I don't seem to conflict with them as often. And why I would guess that is because we're both used to framing things in a certain way. I don't think most people are paying attention to it actually, but if you listen to a lot of what an ISFP, INFP, or an ISTP or an INTP would say, a lot of the times is it's really highly contingent, or it's couched in such a way as to make it clear that it's a personal opinion or a personal point of view, or it should go without saying that that's what that statement was. And so it's hard to argue with somebody when all they're doing is expressing to you what they think, because what position are you in to say, hey, you don't really think that, you really think this. So as long as you're sort of speaking from that, what is your personal judgment thing, I find that there's a lot. I don't mean, there must be a similarity if there's not a lot of conflict. There must be some underlying similarity.
Yeah, I found that too along the way, that I think that introverted thinkers and introverted feelers, DOMs, as you say, leading with them, they do have a lot in common in the way that they process feelings and emotions in a way that is kind of detached from other people. That's kind of...
Yeah, and I guess we should say that technically in the frame terms we're talking, that would be any type that ends in Myers-Briggs in the letter P. So any XXXP type would technically be using introverted judgment before they're using any extroverted judgment process, TI or FI.
What does that mean specifically?
In other words, you're talking about perceivers in Myers-Briggs terms. So every perceiver, if you're a perceiver in terms of your letters and your notation, for sure 100%, you're using TI or FI as your first line of judgment. In other words, it's about your own personal values, your own personal opinions, what you think, and sometimes how you came to think that way. But yeah, the extroverted judgment is going to always kind of be either subordinated to introverted judgment, or it's going to be distorted depending on how you want to look at it. And that, if you go by the function stack, means that every introverted feeler is going to use extroverted thinking, and introverted thinkers are going to use extroverted feeling. But if you're a perception type, your extroverted process is perception. It's not judgment.
Yeah. Would you say that makes people almost like observers of the world and reactive in a way that they take in the world and react to it instead of act on the world and then be more proactive in the way that they are in the world?
I mean, in some sense, but I would say that introverts kind of throw that prediction process off, where I think that the introverted perceivers usually act in a very interested way, like we're doing something to either verify something we think is true, or everything we're doing is almost like a means to some other end. Like we always have like some, I don't want to make it sound sinister, but like a hidden agenda behind our actions. And it could be something as simple as, I want to go out because I want to have a good time. And I'm going to do something that I know I enjoy beforehand, more than I'm likely to try to have a good time by just, letting the wind take me wherever it takes me. It's not a purely perceiver process, I feel like, when you're an introverted perceiver.
Right. That reminds me of something I mentioned in the video that I did, the last typology video of FE versus FI, that introverted feelers and extroverted feelers, there's a difference in the way that you gather feeling for the outside world based on whether it's introverted or extroverted. I kind of liken it to sympathy versus empathy, where it's the sympathetic introverted feeler would say, look at this homeless person. It would really be terrible if I were to be in his or her shoes, and not as much of like the extroverted feeler would have almost like a system in place where it would be, this is wrong because this. So it's more of introverts are more inherently sympathetic and extroverted feelers are more empathetic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of people use those words differently, but I'll use the word, even though it's kind of a mouthful, intersubjective. Like, I feel like introverted judgment is intersubjective, and it's about like having some kind of resonance. Like I resonate in me, with what you're doing, and then it can also be very unsympathetic. Like, I can't relate to you. I can't imagine what kind of person would act that way or think that way or do this action or say what you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the trap fall of it, where it is with introverted feelers not being able to relate to other people or don't want to relate to other people. That's an interesting trap fall. So
yeah, it is different, because introverted thinking, the way it all plugs in, necessarily leads you into extroverted feeling. So I think even like an INTP or an ISTP does have some, whether they want to admit it or not, or whether they're in touch with it or not, some basic innate curiosity about humanity. But it is that FE version of humanity as a whole, en masse, from the outside as an object, to the point where I think Noam Chomsky, I think, is certainly a TI user, often uses the analogy of an astronomer from or an anthropologist from Mars, as if we're not part of the human show, is almost the way we look at it, because extroverted feeling is so diminished and has so much other stuff going on before we even get there. But it's there, even in the introverted thinking, using types.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was getting at with being an observer of the world, where it's a bit removed from people in that sense. I think that's where I was going with it anyway. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is, or I want to hear your thoughts on, are socionics. And because we throw out a lot of terms like you just did with, what was it, said subjective.
What is it?
Oh, your sound went out. Uh-oh. Don't know. Technical difficulties.
Okay, so
You're back.
What I'll do, because my microphone went out, is what I'll do right now is my microphone went out, and we'll start from right here and cut out the last, seconds where you thought you were talking to me, and you can just start right now.
Okay. Well, yeah, one of the things that I wanted to talk about with you today is socionics versus typology, because I feel like a lot of what we talk about and the way that we look at the types stem from socionics as much as it stems from MBTI, and we kind of have a more back to basics look on it. I think we do anyway, where we take a lot of what we talk about from Carl Jung directly and socionics, the Eastern European philosophy. Could you tell us what socionics is, just really simply?
Well, I think the way, so if you're going to encounter the term socionics in the typology community today, you're going to be talking about what you said, the sort of the Eastern Europeans, basically, who are doing Jungian typology. For me, I would like to see the whole typology community move into just calling itself socionics as a sort of a sub branch of sociology. In the way we use terms like, semiotics or critical theory. I wouldn't mind if the whole of typology was just called socionics, but of course, right now that term is pretty much used for the Eastern European psychologists, doctors, clinicians, and behavioral therapists that are studying this. For me, it really is a geographical thing, though. I still feel like as long as we're all talking about the same object, there's going to be a lot of different people with different approaches. And while there is generally, I guess, it's more systematized in the East. In other words, they've decided to sort of speak the same language and work off of each other's projects in a more coordinated fashion. Whereas the MBTI Foundation, Myers-Briggs, and her mother in their books, as well as Kiersey, Beebe, Behrens, Dario Nardi. These guys are all on their own planets. They're not working together. They're all atomized.
That's interesting. So who are some of the main players in Socionics, and how do they differ from the MBTI Foundation and the way they look at the types?
Well, I don't want to throw everybody in the West in with the MBTI Foundation, because they're just probably, you could just call them post-Jungian psychoanalysts, right, who specialize in typology. But the MBTI Foundation versus Socionics is, I'm pretty sure the Foundation, and anybody can correct me in the comments if I'm incorrect on this, but I'm pretty sure the Foundation does not use the functions or admit to the existence even of the functions. They're kind of mums the word on it. I don't think they're explicitly hostile to the functions. And Socionics is, of course, much more, it's essentially based on the functions. The MBTI Foundation and its test and MBTI 2.0 have moved more in the direction of the ocean model. I call it a bridge to behaviorism. For good or for ill, that's what I call it. I call it it's the bridge to behaviorism and behavioral psychology, whatever your feelings are about that. So in some ways, I think it is a good thing, because it's the most popular. It's the most easily digestible for somebody who got an education in psychology that was, more behavioristic in its approach. It's easier to digest what the MBTI Foundation is doing. But at the same time, I don't think a theory of intertype relations is possible. I feel like it's a real dead end. Like, there's no way to get to intertype relations. The group theory and group interactions that are present in Socionics, I can't see how you could build that out of an inventory-based approach like the MBTI Foundation is using.
Right. So I agree. I think it's really a shame that functions aren't talked about more in the MBTI Foundation, because it really is where all the useful information that I've gained from typology has come from. That's been learning the functions and their roles in how I connect with other people or how I don't connect with other people. And that's really where Socionics shines, because it's all about the functions, all about not just, are you an extroverted thinker or not? It's some people, I think it was Gulenko, who was one of the main guys, even went so far as to do how the functions present themselves in the individual types based on where they are and talks about shadow functions and stuff. Right. And it's really helpful, especially for an introverted feeler like myself, who needs people to tell me who I am as a person sometimes. So it's a really neat tool, and I think you're right. I think more people really should study it.
Was there a period of time where you were in the more E versus I, T versus F, S versus N? Did you wander around in that area for long?
I did for a while. Yeah, I was. It's very easy, if you don't look into Socionics, to misunderstand the letter system. The INS.
The notation, letter notation of MBTI.
Just the categories, and I don't blame anyone who hasn't read about any of the behind the scenes stuff and the actual textbook information to think that INFJs and INFPs are almost the same people, because there's just one letter difference.
Right.
I don't blame them for that. And I have, when I first learned about it, I didn't really see typology or cognitive functions as anything useful to me. It came across more as like an astrological thing, because it was just a description of, you're this person and you might have trouble with this based on some, it came across as like a Facebook quiz where it was, do you like thinking instead of feeling? I mean, it wasn't useful, but it's really a shame, because I think there is some very good information in there that is being forgotten.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad information too, like you said. There's a lot of garbage.
Yeah, and people rightly ask, what do you care if people are mistyped or don't get their proper type figured out quickly? And it really is, on a personal level, it doesn't really matter that much. It can be quite minute, but if enough people start being mistyped as a certain type, then the description that they're going to pass on and the descriptions of the actual type will change over time as well. Because if an INFP mistypes as an ENFP, then that person will come across and say, I'm an ENFP, and change people's feelings about what an ENFP is. So that could drive, a wedge in the system.
Yeah, it doesn't help. It only contributes to more confusion. It's moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I fear that anyway. I'm not entirely sure what's going on, but it is very easy right now to create an article for a website after just reading a bit on the MBTI Foundation website about what the types are and getting stuff wrong, and that being the first thing you see if you Google the system. So I don't know. I fear for it a bit, but I also think that it's a ripe time for actual information about functions and about socionics to get out, because now it's all possible.
I think it's definitely the best approach. I do think it's going to take a little bit of time to chip away at the current way of doing. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. The only reason it's not distracting me that much, but it may come across in the actual recording. So I don't know, maybe turn me down if you have me on external speakers or an external monitor.
I do.
Yeah. Maybe either turn it down so it goes below the threshold, or switch if you want to. But now I don't hear myself. It's fine. I don't know if you can still hear me.
Okay, cool.
Okay, we'll just still keep it here for now, and I'll let you know. But I was going to say it's probably the best approach, and the one that's going to be least likely to make you confused. But I was going to say that I think there's a bigger rift intellectually, I think, than probably meets the eye between the functional approach presented by Eastern Socionics and the behavioral approach. It wasn't an accident and it wasn't a mistake that the MBTI did things the way they did. They did it to avoid the kind of criticism that led to the sort of B.F. Skinner behavioristic turn in psychology, which haunts all the way back to Freud, much less Jung, which is where is this ego that you talk about? Where's the super ego? I don't see the id. Is the id under, below the larynx, or where? There's a physiological problem
right,
for someone who is an observationalist or someone who is a hard empiricist, where no analytical or functional theoretic approach is going to be convincing until it meets some measure of predictive power that becomes undeniable.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
And I do think that they're dealing with a valid working theory, and I do think it's literally only a question of culture and money, grant money. I think if enough money is put behind this, I think that, the science, that's how science works either way. Even if you didn't disagree, you shouldn't disagree with the idea of exploring it. I think that if we do explore it, we'll get more and more out of the functional model and the functional approach than we will out of any size behavioral inventory created by, whether you're talking about the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is talking about how the brain breaks, or the MBTI, which is talking about how the brain works.
Right. Yeah, I also wonder, because you mentioned money, and I also wonder if one of the reasons why they changed their system over time was to benefit businesses more. One of the places where you will likely encounter the MBTI Foundation is at a workplace, where they will have you do a test to assign your type. and a few buzzwords will come up and say this person is great at coming up with new ideas. This person isn't so great at this, this, and this. And I wonder if that's one of the motivations that they had to implement it on more workspaces and get rid of the more the heavier, more reflective stuff.
That is true, but I would still say that goes back to the intellectual culture. If you had more corporate America, people in corporate America who were educated in the classics of psychology, and not educated in modern psychology and modern psychology alone, and not getting to the roots of this split intellectually, then people wouldn't be so skeptical of something that looks like functions or looks like any analytical model. Analytical psychology is something that you almost have to have a mind to understand. And
Right.
Behavioral psychology is something that can be done with a sufficiently advanced computer and a video camera, depending on how you're modeling things and what you're looking for. And that's why people say, well, that's, we like that. It's ironclad. But I don't think that it presents a full picture of a living organism if we're talking about behavior as at least being something chaotically determined and not being something linearly determined. It's worth looking at it, in my opinion, a different way. And I think there are some limits to behaviorism, but that would take us off the topic of typology in particular.
Right. Well, I thought I'd bring it up anyway. I think I highly recommend everyone check out the website Wikisocion. Is it .com or .net?
It's actually .net. It used to be .org, but .org for one reason or another. I don't know who ran, who starts, who maintains, and who pays for Wikisocion.org, the original sort of Wikipedia for socionics, which is a really nice cross-sectional resource for anybody who is just interested in typology or the functions. It can be a little bit hard to get into because the Eastern Europeans use different notation. They use a 3-letter notation, not a 4-letter notation. So sometimes it can be helpful to have someone who does know a little bit more about typology, help them make sure you're not reading things wrong or walk you through it, because there are some terminological differences. But go to wikisocion.net, net, because .org is down, but there's a mirror at .net. I don't know if it's the same people. I don't know if it's different people. I don't know if they got in trouble with their web host, but .net is still up as of this broadcast. I'm not even sure what day it is, because we're INTPs. We're thinkers, but we're still NE users. We still get a little scatterbrained. I know it's early August because I just had to pay rent.
Yeah.
That's about
anyways,
it.
I would recommend it. I was a bit intimidated to get into it at first, but the website itself looks exactly like Wikipedia. There's plenty of cross references and see, I thought when I first heard about it that it would be this very dry, these very long paragraphs of big words, and it's very simple the way that it's put up, and it's very succinctly described all the information, I think. So I highly recommend that you check it out if you have not. And,
yes, good. I don't know who put effort into it, but they did a good job. I thought you were going to go a different direction with it when you were talking about the dryness of it, because one thing I've definitely noticed, and I think I've talked to you about before in chat, is the Eastern Europeans do not hold back in their description of the types. They are much more straightforward, and
they do not. Yeah,
not a lot of euphemisms. It's hilarious, even though you're reading about your own type, but the guy's just straight burning you, like in the middle of your own. In the middle of your own.
It's fantastic. Yeah, it's so wonderful. I find it's very kitsch. Like it's very. It doesn't hold any punches. Let's just put it like that. The way that if this Socionics writer thinks that ENFPs are terrible at doing something, they will say this person sucks at doing their job because they are childlike. But if you kind of take it with a grain of salt and just know that it might be a cultural thing, then I think that it's good, because it's like an honest look at who you really are, and I think that's funny and kitsch and deep in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the stuff I think that makes it fun, because it's such a complicated thing once you do have functions and you start doing type relations. When you do look at things like the romance styles, the erotic attitudes, and some of the way those relationships are described, it is hilariously colorful. And I think that as long as you're looking at people like they're pigeons, which it ultimately kind of feels like what the MBTI Foundation is doing, you're never going to get that kind of color out of this psychology or this psychological tool.
No, absolutely not. Let's see.
Well, we've been going on over 20 minutes. I want to keep it, I guess, probably around a half an hour, just for the sake of anyone else. I kind of wanted to talk about our types functions, but I don't think we have time to actually do that right now. But I know at the very least, introverted thinking is not a very high function for ENFP. So maybe you could just talk about introverted thinking, and that'll be the last thing we talk about until the next episode.
Oh man, for me to talk about introverted thinking, well, I see introverted thinking as a very useful tool of learning in new information. It's almost like if you're learning a new tool or a new method, it's about learning all of it before practicing any one particular use. It's like, for instance, I use extroverted thinking. So if I'm looking for a specific thing, I will Google it and use the information directly. An introverted thinker would take it much more broadly and sort of build a whole framework around the new information and go around the corners and make sure that all the information is readily available. Let me know if you disagree. By
Yeah,
the way.
well, yeah, no, not entirely. It's almost like we already have. It's like it's already ready. There's already a place ready for it to be put. It's like it has its own systematic picture, but then that systematic picture, not in the same way of introverted intuition, because I know that it could probably be described similarly, but it's like we already have that systematized way of systematizing things,
Right.
and then you can fit that system into our system of systems.
Yeah.
But I was going to also ask, what do you think in your personal experience? Which introverted thinking type do you think you have most experience with? ENTP, INTP, ESTP, or ISTP?
Probably INTPs. Yeah, just from personal experience and the people that I've talked to, specifically about typology. What was I going to say? I had something about introverted thinking. Well, anyways, I can't remember.
You were talking about probably, I guess the depth of the way it. It is a pretty active process, and it does. I do like to try to figure things out by myself before going to some external source, just because it's faster. I'm lazy, just and if you are a person who uses introverted thinking a lot, it gets exercise and it gets adept and it gets flexible. And so it's, you get a pretty good batting average just kind of guessing what things are, that rather than going through the effort of actually trying to find a verified, authoritative answer somewhere, out there in the ether.
Oh, now I remember. I was going to say, to me, introverted thinking is like when I think of the function, the first thing that comes to mind is math. It's like this. It's a system that it necessitates that the formula for you to get the result. So it's a framework that you need to incorporate into your brain to be able to answer certain questions. Like the way I see it, it is a system. It's all about learning all the kinks of the system before you can execute an action. To me, anyway, that's how I see it.
Yeah, I can definitely see. I think what you're looking at in terms of there definitely seems to always be an axiomatic framework that introverted thinking brings to the table, and it's hard to know what the bottom of that process is when you do try to go down. You and do your Cartesian meditations and your free floating introverted thinking. It's like trying to get to the core of an onion, but
yeah.
In that,
a lot of layers to it for sure. There's it isn't introverted functions can be hard to explain if you don't have them, I think, because they don't present themselves that much to other people. It's very self-reliant, and it's all going on inside the user's brain and then shown in other ways. So all I can really say is what I've read from other people and what I've observed. But it is looking from the outside, it does look like a huge framework that is very impressive and also very thorough. Thorough is a good word.
Well, I guess how impressive and how thorough it is ultimately depends on opinion and I would say the introverted thinker, because there are some stupid introverted thinking dominants, but maybe we'll leave it at there and we can talk about other functions
It
next
depends
time.
which information you decide to look up too. If the information that you're finding is stupid, then your framework is going to be stupid too, I guess. So
yeah, and a bad blender can't make margaritas either. So, you know, sometimes it's just sometimes the motor's just weak.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks for this. We'll try to do it again. Maybe even keep it on a regular timetable. I know I got a couple dozen people watching it, and it's more than zero, and it's only going to escalate. So hopefully, if anything we said was interesting, or if you want us to focus on or hit on another point, let us know below on both my and Peter's channel.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Do you have any ideas for what we should call this podcast? Let us know. Just, hit us up with ideas.
I'll probably have a title by the time they're watching it. But heck, I'll even change it for you. I'm really flexible. And as always, I will have my link, and Peter will have his link to both of our channels, and as well as our typology chat if you want to talk about this subject or any other subject. We don't necessarily only talk typology. It's a lot of people interacting, talking about movies and art and music and all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun. It would be so cool to have new people come join us.
We already have had a couple, so I'm sure that you won't be the first, sadly, if you're going on this invitation. But you don't have to be the last. So we'd love to hear from you.
You'll be slightly less special, but equally welcome.
That's right. That's right. And the longer you wait, the less special you'll be. So you better hurry up and join now, so you can be as special as possible, because it's just downhill from here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Get to it. I kid. All right. Thanks for joining me, Peter, and I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.